No gluten, no dairy, and low cholesterol. No, no, no. No gluten, no dairy, none at all. Low, 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 low cholesterol. Hello, I'm Jean Duane, alternative cook. Welcome to my kitchen. If you're avoiding dairy products or gluten, or if you're eating a diet of low or no cholesterol, this program is for you. I have learned firsthand of the profound impact food can have on the body. I am gluten and dairy intolerant, and I eat a low cholesterol diet. Over the years, I've learned to cook without these ingredients, and I've honed my skills at cooking school and studied many methods. I'll show you how to use whole, unrefined, unprocessed foods, primarily beans and grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts, and of course chocolate, in ways that are pleasing to the palate and fun to prepare. The series of DVDs will show how to cook delicious dishes covering many genres of cuisine. Now, let's get started. Hi, Cookie.
Hi, Jean. Jean, how are you going to make Italian food dairy-free and gluten-free? I don't think you can do it. Traditional Italian food is laden with wheat, pasta, and lots of cheese.
Cookie, there are alternatives. For example, in this DVD, we'll make pizzas with a portobello mushroom as the base, breaded eggplant, and roasted vegetables. It's a fun and elegant alternative to pizza.
I love the way they're stacked with all of the toppings. What else are you going to make?
Pesto is one of my favorite Italian pasta toppings. We'll make pesto with fresh basil, pine nuts, and garlic in a miso base and serve it with glazed acorn squash.
Miso! Isn't that the fermented soy that is used for miso soup?
Yes!
How creative! So the miso takes the place of the cheese?
That's right!
Okay, Jean, I have a real challenge for you. How would you make my favorite Italian meal, spaghetti and meatballs?
We'll make meatballs out of a mushroom base, which tastes great and they freeze well for a quick meal. We'll serve the meatballs with a rich tomato sauce that's easy and fast to make. This is accompanied with a mixed green salad and a special avocado dressing.
Wow, those sound good. Okay, I have another challenge for you. How would you make a cream sauce without cream?
Most people think that cream sauces are out of the question when they're dairy-free. We'll make a carbonara sauce out of cashews that's every bit as rich as the traditional carbonara sauce from eggs and cream.
I wonder if that's as good as the custard you made from cashews on our chocolate DVD. That's still my favorite. Cashews are really versatile, aren't they, Jean?
You know, cashews are a great substitute for rich, creamy dairy products, but they are high in fat. Most of the foods on this DVD are low in fat, like the next dish, minestrone and homemade breadsticks. Both of these are low fat.
I love minestrone, and I can't wait to try the breadsticks.
The gluten-free, dairy-free breadsticks are packed with flavor from herbs and garlic, and they're a nice accompaniment to the soup.
You know, Jean, being dairy-free and gluten-free means I need to take food with me if I go to a party. Do you have any suggestions for an Italian theme party?
I do, Cookie. Lasagna is a crowd pleaser. The lasagna we'll make features several layers: a cheese made of tofu, roasted vegetables, sun-dried tomatoes and mushrooms, and it's accented with seasoned nuts. It sounds pretty different, doesn't it? But it's pretty and tasty and a nice change from the heavy, rich lasagna made in the traditional way.
That sounds like the perfect thing to take to a potluck party.
So, Cookie, let's get ready to cook. And remember, there's always an alternative. Portobello pizzas. Portobello pizzas are a fun, colorful alternative to pizzas. They feature a marinated mushroom for the base. Inside the mushroom we'll put a pre-prepared spaghetti sauce that we enhance. Then we'll top it with a breaded eggplant and top the whole thing off with some beautiful roasted peppers. It's a very pretty dish. The first thing we need to do is to make the topping. This is going to be a Parmesan substitute topping, and it can be used in place of Parmesan cheese. To start off, we put almonds, these are just raw almonds, into boiling water for 1 minute and boil them so we can pop the skins off. Look at these. See how the skins look like they're just about ready to pop right off? This is an indication that they're done. Now I'm going to strain them, and then I'm going to put them on a paper towel and pat them dry. The skins just pop right off. See that? Isn't that fun? Place the blanched skinned almonds on a roasting pan, spread them out, and place the almonds in a 350-degree oven for 8 minutes to start. After the almonds have baked about 8 minutes, you want to move them around on the baking sheet. This is definitely worth practicing. And then you want to put them back in the oven for about 5 to 8 more minutes. They take a little longer because we blanched them and they have more moisture in them. To make the Parmesan nut topping, first we start with our toasted blanched almonds. These have cooled now, so they're ready to use. We put those in the food processor. Garlic salt, garlic powder, oregano, basil, and nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast is what gives this cheese taste. Process until it turns into a powder.
Nutritional yeast is grown on molasses and then pasteurized to kill the yeast. It's full of 18 amino acids, 15 minerals, and rich in B-complex vitamins, including B12. It gives a cheese taste to dishes.
Oh, isn't that nice? Look at this color. Isn't that beautiful? Taste. This would be great on anything that you would normally put cheese on. Let's soak the eggplant. I like to soak the eggplant before I cook it to get rid of the bitter taste. First, let's slice it into 1/2-inch rounds. Put about a teaspoon of salt in warm water in a big bowl. Move it around a little bit so it dissolves. Place the eggplant slices in the bowl and put a weight on top. I'm just using another bowl with water. It's just a weight. You could use anything that you have that's heavy. And let it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes until the water turns brown. Now I'm going to mix up some water and some arrowroot. Arrowroot is instead of egg. I want to mix a dredge, and I'm going to put amaranth flour and sorghum flour. I'm going to season it a little bit with some herbs, starting with marjoram, basil, and oregano. And I'm going to put in a little bit of garlic salt.
Sorghum flour is made from milled sorghum grain. It's known as a cereal grass and is native to Africa. It's one of the oldest grains to sustain humankind and is still common in Africa and India. It's also known as millet, American brown corn, Guinea corn, and Kaffir corn. It's one of the main flours used in the mix of gluten-free flours.
Mix this around. And then just dip the eggplant into the arrowroot and water mixture. Dip it into the flour. And now it's going to be ready to put in the frying pan. Put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a frying pan. And then just put the eggplant in. We'll let it cook for a little while and then we'll turn it. I'm ready to turn them. And I want to cover them and cook them again on medium heat for another 10 minutes or so. Let's prepare the mushrooms. First, we're going to make a little bowl out of this mushroom. So first, we're going to cut the stem out. And you could save this for a stock or for soup. And then we're going to de-spore the mushroom. And to do that, you just take a spoon and pull the spores out. Next, we cut the peppers. And take out all the seeds. Since I'm going to build little haystacks on the top, I'm going to cut these into thin strips. And now I'm ready to make a marinade. To make the marinade, just take some oil, this is olive oil, and some vinegar. This is brown rice vinegar, and I really like the taste of brown rice vinegar. It's a soft vinegar. Some garlic salt, and some oregano. Whisk it together and pour it on the mushrooms and the peppers. These mushrooms are like a sponge. They're going to soak up a lot of this marinade and it's going to make them taste great. So I just want to pour it in here and let them absorb this for a little while, maybe for 10 minutes or so. Place these in a 400-degree oven for 20 minutes. I'm going to enhance some pre-prepared spaghetti sauce. This is Classico tomato basil sauce, and at the moment it doesn't contain any gluten or dairy products, although you do have to check the label. And I'm going to enhance it by just slicing up some olives. First some black olives, and then some green olives. This adds a nice flavor to the Italian sauce. To assemble, take a portobello and put it on the bottom. Take a little bit of the sauce and put it in the bowl that we made from desporing the mushroom. Put an eggplant on next. And top it with the peppers. Sprinkle with the Parmesan cheese. This is a great alternative to pizza. Fresh basil pesto sauce. It's such a fresh, fragrant sauce that can be served on vegetables or over spaghetti squash or on fish or on pasta. We'll serve this on rice pasta today, and I'm using tinkyada penne. This is a rice pasta that cooks really well, and it's gluten-free and dairy-free. And I'm going to get it going right now before I start the pesto and the squash, because this is a pretty quick meal, and I think by the time we're finished with the pesto and the squash, the pasta will be cooked. Let's cut the squash. I'm going to use a glove. This is a reinforced glove, just because the squash is a little bit hard. I'm going to cut out the seeds. And now I want to make a glaze for them. To make the glaze, just take some olive oil, some tamari, rice syrup.
Rice syrup is a syrup made from rice. It's not as sweet as corn syrup, honey, or sugar. It has a nice taste. Some rice syrups contain barley malt. Lundberg rice syrup is gluten-free.
And mirin wine.
Mirin is a slightly sweet golden wine made from rice. Sometimes it's called rice wine or sake, but sake has a higher alcohol content. Mirin is a common condiment used in Japanese cooking and is available in Asian markets or in the health food store.
And just whisk it all together. This really smells nice. And then put it on each one of the squash. Bake the squash in a 400-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. To make the pesto, I'm going to start with 2 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to peel them first and then put them in the food processor. And garlic, it's one of those things you can use as much or as little of as you like. I like it a little strong with garlic. So I'm going to put this in the processor and then mince it first before I add anything else. This pesto uses brown rice miso as the base instead of cheese. You have to be careful when buying miso because it may contain glutinous grains such as barley and other grains. It also may contain different preservatives that you might not want to eat. And they're all different. So this is the one I'm using, and this one just has soybeans and rice koji and sea salt and koji spores, which are okay, they're gluten-free. So I think this one's fine to eat.
Miso is a rich, salty condiment made from fermented beans and sometimes with added grains. Miso is fermented from 1 to 3 years, and different aging processes yield different tastes and aromas.
We start by putting in about 3 tablespoons of the brown rice miso. Add the piñon nuts, olive oil, and the basil. Isn't this beautiful basil? And it smells just wonderful. I'm going to start off with about 2 tablespoons of water. I'm just going to eyeball it, just a little bit of water. I may add more. I'm going to test it first. Process. Oh, that looks so good. And taste. This is such a rich taste. This is going to be great on the pasta. To assemble, I've put the pasta that's cooked in the bowl. I'm going to add the pesto. And toss it. And serve. This is a really hearty meal too. It's very filling. And then just put some of the squash on the side to decorate. And now it's ready to serve. Spaghetti and meatballs. This is an easy dish to make and fun to serve to your family. The meatballs are made with a mushroom base and seasoned with herbed, gluten-free, dairy-free breadcrumbs. I'm making the breadcrumbs from bread that I made with my bread machine with a gluten-free, dairy-free setting. You could purchase gluten-free, dairy-free bread to use in this recipe. The meatballs are easy to make, and since they bake, you can make them and bake them and freeze them for future use. They make a great accompaniment for many dishes. To start, let's make the breadcrumbs. This recipe calls for 1 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm just going to eye it. I'm guessing about 1 slice of bread is about 1/4 cup. So I'm going to use 4 slices of bread to start. Add the herbs to the food processor. First, the oregano, the marjoram, the vegetable bouillon, and garlic salt. Process until it turns into breadcrumbs. These would make great herbed breadcrumbs for anything that you need seasoned breadcrumbs for. Let's put this in a mixing bowl and set it aside for future use. While we have the processor out, let's process the mushrooms. First, chop the mushrooms in half, and then just put them in the food processor. I'm only going to process half of these at a time because I think the food processor works better with less. Process until they look like this. Now, there's some big pieces in here, but if I processed any more, they'd get too ground. This is our meat substitute, and I want it to be just about this consistency. Pour the mushrooms into a bowl, and we'll reserve these for future use. Next, we chop and process the onion. I'm just going to quarter it, and I'm going to pulse. That's just about right. And we'll set these aside for future use. Let's take 3 cloves of garlic and just put it in the food processor. And process until it's minced. Put this in a little bowl and set it aside for future use. We're going to start now by sauteing the mushrooms. First, we're going to put about 2 tablespoons or so of olive oil in the pan, and then add the mushrooms. The rule is mushrooms first and then onions. And I want to cook these down till they get about half done, and then I'll add the onions. I want the moisture to cook out of the mushrooms. These are about halfway done, and now I'm going to add the onions. I want to cook the onions until they're opaque. A lot of the moisture will cook out of both of these. They'll make better meatballs that way. The onions are about halfway done, and now I'm going to add the garlic. By the time the onions are all the way done, the garlic will be just perfect. This is done. It's taken about 15 minutes to cook everything and get it to this stage. Now I want to chop a little bit of parsley. I'd like to chop about 1/4 of a cup, which I'm just going to eye, and put that into my breadcrumb mixture. We're ready to assemble. First, let's add the mushroom mix to the breadcrumbs. Add the parsley to the breadcrumbs. And I've mixed the equivalent of 1 egg out of egg substitute. This is energy egg substitute, and I need it for a binder in this. And one last thing to add. This is the almond Parmesan cheese that we made in an earlier segment, and I'm adding about 1/3 of a cup of it to this mixture to give the meatballs sort of a cheese taste. And now we're ready to roll some meatballs. I make them a little small, about like that. Before I bake the meatballs, I want to brown them on the outside. So I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of oil in a pan, and then just let these brown all around. I don't want to put too many in the pan, so there's a little room to move them around each time. These have cooked a few minutes, and I'm turning them over just to get some of the other sides to be browned. See how nice and brown these have gotten? These are ready to put on the baking sheet and bake. Place the meatballs in a 400-degree oven for 20 minutes. We're going to make some spaghetti sauce now, and this is a really easy and good spaghetti sauce that features Cabernet wine. In the meantime, I want to cook the spaghetti. I'm using Tinchiata spaghetti-style brown rice pasta. This will cook and taste like spaghetti, but there's absolutely no wheat in the product, and it's gluten-free. To make the sauce, let's start with garlic. I want to start with 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to mince them. I'm going to put about a teaspoon of oil in the pan and just saute the garlic for a few minutes. The next thing to add is the tomatoes. This can contains tomato pulp. Add the Cabernet wine. That smells so nice. Tarragon, basil, oregano, and garlic salt. I'm just going to simmer this a little while so that the herbs open up and the flavors all blend together. We're going to complement the spaghetti and meatballs with a nice salad. This is just a simple green salad with a special dressing. The dressing is an avocado-based dressing. And first we're going to mince a clove of garlic in the blender. And then add a half of an English cucumber. And I'm peeling the cucumber and one avocado. Some parsley, some brown rice vinegar, some lemon juice, and some garlic salt. Blend. This is going to be a nice thick dressing. Taste. Isn't it pretty? Look how nice and green it is. It's got a lot of flavor. This is really going to be a nice complement to the salad. To assemble, put some spaghetti in the bowl. Put some sauce on next. Put a couple meatballs on. I think 3 is a good number. And sprinkle with the almond Parmesan cheese. This is a great everyday meal. Creamy, thick, rich carbonara sauce. Doesn't that sound good? This sauce is made with a cashew cream base. Cashews make a nice substitute for cream sauces. This dish also features tempeh.
Tempeh is a fermented soybean. It's considered raw and must be cooked before consumed. Tempeh is a staple food in Indonesia. It's high in vitamin B12 and protein and makes a great substitute for meat. Sometimes tempeh contains grains such as oats and barley, so please read the label. This package contains soybeans and rice.
To start, we're going to steam the tempeh. If you are going to cook tempeh in a liquid where you're going to boil it, you don't have to steam it first. Otherwise, you should steam it first because it's got some cultures in it and you want to steam those out. So the first thing we do is just open it up. And I'm using a steamer, but if you have any kind of saucepan with a little rack, that would be fine. Just put about that much water in, put the lid on it, and let it steam. No problem. You don't have to have a special appliance to do this. Although you do need a pair of scissors to open up the tempeh. Just put it in the steamer and turn it on for 10 minutes. And then it'll be ready to use. The tempeh has steamed for 10 minutes. And I'm going to take it out of the steamer and cut it on the diagonal. What we're making is tempeh bacon. We're going to make it taste like bacon with umeboshi plum vinegar and with tamari. Tempeh absorbs the liquids better if it's sliced diagonally. I'm slicing it about 1/4 of an inch thick.
The umi plum is common in Japan. It's harvested when green, and when pickled, it's called an umeboshi plum. It's often used as a salt and/or condiment. These plums are tart and are also made into a vinegar, a wine, and jam.
The next thing we do is drizzle the tempeh with oil. This is sunflower oil, and I'm going to drizzle it and let it soak in a little. This is a great thing to serve on salads or as a condiment and we're going to serve it in the traditional way in the carbonara sauce. Okay, this tempeh has soaked in a little bit of oil for just a few minutes, and now I'm ready to put it in the frying pan. I'm going to let it brown. I don't want it to cook too fast, so I'm going to put it on medium heat and let it brown on both sides. To flavor it, I'm taking equal parts of umeboshi plum vinegar and gluten-free tamari, and then I'm putting that into a bowl so I can mix it. I'm going to turn the heat off and pour this on. This will form sort of a crust on the bottom of the tempeh and make it taste like bacon. This is exactly what you want it to look like now. This is ready to set aside so we can use it in the carbonara sauce. To make the cream carbonara sauce, this is so easy to make because everything is done in the blender and then we just cook it. The first thing we do is take 1 clove of garlic and put it in the blender. If you like a little more garlic, you could use 2. And then let's blend that so it gets minced a little bit. Then we put the cashews in the blender and blend them just so they start blending and turning into a little bit of a powder first. That's about right. It's a little bit powdery and it's going to make it blend a lot better when I put the liquid in. And the next thing is the liquid, which is water, white wine, umeboshi plum vinegar, and some nutritional yeast. Blend until smooth. This will take a few minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Let's taste this. Now it's ready to cook. Pour the mixture into a saucepan. Since this is made of cashews and cashews are full of fat, we put a heat diffuser between the saucepan and the burner. This is a heat diffuser and it just keeps it from burning up, theoretically. I'm going to put it between the saucepan and the burner, and when this gets hot, I'm going to turn it down to medium. While I'm waiting, I'm going to chop up some parsley that we're going to use for a garnish on top. This is cooking. It's taking time with the flame tamer, but it's best to do it this way because otherwise it would scorch really quickly. In the meantime, I'm going to cook the fettuccine. And I have the water boiling behind me, and this is tinchiata fettuccine style rice pasta. This is getting thicker and it's just about the right consistency for a sauce. It's cooked down about a ½ inch. And if you look at the sides of the pan, you can see that. And also, because it'll coat the back of a spoon. See how it's coating the back of a spoon? It's not as thick as a custard. It's thinner, but it's about the right consistency for a sauce. Now, I want to add the peas. This is just about a cup of peas. And just a little pepper. This would be a great sauce for a creamed vegetable. This is done, and I'm going to put it aside until I'm ready to assemble the dish. Braised Brussels sprouts will make a nice accompaniment to the carbonara sauce. I'm going to cut these in half. I like to cut these in half so there's a lot of surface space in the pan. Pour a little oil in the pan. Add the Brussels sprouts. I'm going to roll the lemon while I'm waiting for the Brussels sprouts to cook. And then I want to ream it. I want to put the juice of 1 lemon in here. I'm definitely getting some seeds, so I'll strain this. Then I want to add almost the same exact amount of umeboshi plum vinegar. This is a sort of a tart braising liquid, and it's going to make a nice complement with the sauce. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water. And now this is ready to add as soon as these are browned. Look at this. This is perfect. This is exactly how brown I want these to be before I add the braising liquid. See that? I just want them to be browned a little bit on the bottom. Those are just right. Now I'm going to strain the liquid in here, put a lid on the pan, and let all of the liquid evaporate. This is a braising technique. The braising liquid has evaporated. These have steamed in the liquid, and now they're ready to serve. To assemble this whole ensemble, take the carbonara sauce and put it on top of the fettuccine. Add a couple of the strips of the tempeh bacon. And you could break it up if you wanted to, or you could serve it like this in pieces. Sprinkle parsley on top. And then we'll just add some Brussels sprouts to complement it. This is an elegant dish, and one that you could be proud to serve to company. Minestrone soup and homemade herbed breadsticks. Most people who need to avoid gluten have probably had some interesting experiences with gluten-free bread. I know I have. These breadsticks have been developed after a year of trial and error, and I'm pleased with the results. I've learned a few things along the way, and I'll share my secrets with you. Gluten-free bread only has to rise a couple of hours, so they don't take all day like some other breads may take. Let's start by making a flax mix. I take the flax seed and add it to the blender, and then I'm going to add water. Just blend it until it's completely emulsified. See how thick this gets? I use this flax mix a lot in baked recipes as an egg replacement. Plus, it adds fiber to your bread. We'll start by making a base for the bread. I'm going to start with 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to mince them with the blade in the food processor. When you're making baked goods, it's really important to follow the measurements precisely. The exact measurements are included in the recipe booklet included with the DVD. Mince the garlic and then switch to the dough blade. We'll be using the dough blade for the rest of the base. Add the flax mix, olive oil, apple cider vinegar, salt, xanthan gum, agar powder.
Agar is a vegetarian gelatin. It's obtained from seaweed. It's also known as Canton. It's used as a thickening agent in soups, jellies, and desserts. It comes in sticks, which must be melted in water before using, or in powder form. It can be purchased in health food stores or in Asian grocery stores.
oregano, basil, and marjoram. Process until thick. We'll set this aside for future use. In a separate bowl, mix the dry ingredients. First, brown rice flour, cornstarch, potato starch, tapioca flour, and almond meal. I made my own almond meal. You can either toast the almonds for 8 minutes at 350 degrees and then put them in a food processor, or you can just use raw almonds and put them in a food processor and process them until they make a meal. It really just depends on the taste that you're after. I'm using raw almonds today. Whisk to incorporate the flours. Okay, I promised to tell you a couple secrets about making bread. Here's one. First, you take the temperature of the dry ingredients. This is an instant read thermometer. It gives you the temperature of anything really quickly. The temperature of the dry ingredients is 75 degrees. Now, the secret magic number for bread is 140. So if I know my dry ingredients are 75 degrees, I subtract 75 from 140 and I get 65. That means that my yeast mixture needs to be 65 degrees. I'm going to add maple syrup to my milk. I'm using an almond milk in this bread. You could use any kind of milk that you like to use for this bread. I'm going to mix it up and take its temperature. Okay, it's 45 degrees. So I know I need to raise the temperature of this about 20 degrees. I'm going to guess that I'm going to microwave it for 20 seconds and then take the temperature again. The temperature of it now is about 66 degrees, so that's pretty close. That's going to work just fine. I'm going to add the yeast now, and I want to proof the yeast. I'm just going to put the yeast in here and mix it up and wait until it bubbles to make sure that the yeast is activated. See how there's bubbles in the yeast? You can see it's sort of foamy. This means that the yeast is active and it will ferment correctly. Add the dry ingredients to the bread base. Add the yeast mixture to the food processor and process exactly 45 seconds. I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 44, 45. You know how you can just look at a dough and tell you've got it right? This is the right consistency. I'm very happy with this dough. Now I want to take its temperature, and I want it to be between 77 and 80 degrees. If it's between 77 and 80 degrees, then it'll ferment perfectly. This is a very sticky dough. So here's another secret. Oil your hands to work with the dough. The oil keeps the dough from sticking to your hands and also makes the bread have a nice golden finish when it's done. I had a little mishap with the knife, so I'm going to use a glove on this hand and oil my hands. You can make as many as you want. I say in the recipe 8 or 9. It depends on how big you like them. You may be wondering two things. You may be wondering, why are there glasses on the cookie sheet, and why is she putting the dough on a cookie sheet? Okay, I've got the answers. The first thing is, with gluten-free doughs, once they rise, you don't want to move them. So I found the best thing to do is to let it rise on the pan you're going to bake it on. So we're going to let it rise one time on this pan and then put it right in the oven. The other thing is, these glasses are here because I want to let it rise in an airtight tent. I'm going to build a little tent with plastic wrap and put the plastic wrap over the top of the sheet and try to form a seal. Now I'll let this sit and rise for 2 to 3 hours. These have risen for a couple of hours. See how nice and puffy they are? I'm going to bake them in a 450-degree oven for about 17 minutes. These have baked for 18 minutes. It took 18 minutes to get them this perfectly brown. And now I want to do the test. Hear how it sounds hollow? That means that they're done. They need to cool and then they'll be ready to serve. This hearty soup is easy to make and very filling. It's low in fat and high in protein and features a lot of vegetables. Since we'll be making a stock, the soup has a nice flavor. We're thickening the soup with okra. This is okra, and it's a natural vegetable thickener, and it gives the soup a nice consistency. It's grown extensively in the South, and it originates from Africa. If you can't find okra, go ahead and make the soup without it, but it's definitely worth looking for. To make the stock, we want every vegetable to be represented. And what we do is we just take a piece of each one of the vegetables and put it in the pot. So I'm just going to cut off the parts that you probably wouldn't want to be putting in your soup. And on the leeks, I'm just going to take off some of the top part of the leek. I don't really want to put too much leek in the stock because it's got a pretty strong flavor. So just a few of the leeks would be just perfect. And then I want to put some of the okra in here just so the taste of the okra permeates the stock. And a few leaves of spinach. You could put some stems in too. Okay, so that's going to make a nice stock. What you do is you cover the vegetables with water. We're going to boil this until the vegetables look dead, until all of the color and life is out of them. And then we'll strain it and we'll have some great stock to make the soup. To make the soup, we start by sauteing the leek. I'm wearing a glove today. Vegetables are slippery, and this is just a reinforcement on my hand. I'm going to cut the leek, and I think I'm going to keep them round like this because when they break up, they're going to be sort of pretty in the soup. To saute the leek, I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in my soup pot. I'm just going to cook everything in the same pot, and then add the leek. This is already warm. I'm going to move them around the pan so they all get coated in oil. We'll let the leeks cook until they're about halfway done, and in the meantime, we'll mince some garlic. I'm going to roll the garlic with this thing, get the skins to pop right off. I'm just going to mince this. See how the leeks are shiny and turned a bright green? They're about halfway done, and this is the time now to add the next vegetable. I'll add the minced garlic and just stir it around to get it coated in oil. And we'll let the garlic and the leeks cook together and cut the carrots. Sort of like everything in my soup to be about the same size. Place the chopped carrots in the pan and stir them around until they get coated in oil. And we'll let them cook until they get about half done. While the carrots are cooking, I'm going to cut up the celery. I'm adding the vegetables in order of their density. Add the celery to the pot. Stir it around so that the celery gets coated in the oil, and we'll let this cook until the celery is about halfway done. Next, we'll cut the okra. I'm just going to cut the ends off and then just slice the okra about like that. Add the cut okra to the pot. Stir it around. The okra has an interesting goo inside that makes the soup thicken. I'm going to cut the squash in quarters and then slice it. And since these two vegetables have just about the same density, I'll add them both at the same time. Add the squash to the soup pot and stir it to get the oil to coat the cut squash. And we'll let this cook for a little while. Slow cooking your vegetables for a soup makes it taste really good. Chop some spinach. I'm just going to use about this much spinach. And I'm going to set it aside because you add the spinach at the very end when the soup is nearly ready to serve. That should be just about right. Next, we're going to add the herbs to the vegetables and oil before we add the soup stock. I'm going to crush this fennel in a mortar and pestle. Crushing it releases this wonderful scent, and it makes the soup just taste great. Add the crushed fennel, red hot pepper flakes, tarragon, and basil. This stock is ready to add to the soup. See how the vegetables look really dull now? There's no life left in the vegetables, but all of the flavoring is still in the water. So what we want to do is drain this into the soup and then throw these vegetables away. They're not edible now. Add the tomatoes. I'm just using a can of diced, peeled tomatoes with no salt added because I like to add my own salt to things. I'm adding 2 cans of tomatoes and I'm adding a cup of rice pasta. This is fusilini. You could add any shape that you like. This is tinchiata rice pasta. I'm going to put all this together in the pot and stir it. I'm adding Cabernet red wine. This is a dry red wine. I'm going to put a lid on this pot now and let it simmer for about 15 or 20 minutes until the pasta is cooked. This soup is cooked about 18 minutes or so. And to finish it, I'm going to add the cannellini beans, which I drained, and the spinach. Doesn't that look good? And garlic salt. I'm going to stir everything up. Isn't that beautiful? This is such a pretty soup. And put the lid back on for about 5 minutes. The spinach will steam with just the heat that's in the pot, and then it's ready to serve. Before we serve the bread, I want to make a dip for it. This is made with olive oil. It's a really simple dip, but it's nice to serve with the breadsticks and the soup. This is lecithin and garlic salt. I'm going to mix this together, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Just mix it together and then I'll put it in a serving bowl. It's a nice thing to put out instead of butter. This is a great soup to have on hand, and it lasts for several days in the refrigerator. This is an unusual lasagna and certainly not the kind you see every day. This lasagna doesn't have sauce, but it has some great layers that make it look beautiful and taste wonderful. It's a good dish to prepare beforehand if you're planning to have company or if you need something to take to a potluck. To start, we're going to salt the eggplant. In an earlier segment, I showed how to soak the eggplant. This is a different technique to get the brine out of the eggplant. So what you do is you slice it first and then put salt in between each layer. Let the eggplant sit for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then it'll be ready to bake. Next, we slice the summer squash. I'm just going to slice it in pieces about as thick as I slice the eggplant so they cook at about the same time. These eggplants have sat for about 15 minutes with the salt, and you can see how they're sweating. See how there's water forming on the top and how the water is coming out? That's what you want to happen. That's going to take some of that bitter taste out of the eggplant. So these are ready now to roast. To roast the vegetables, start by putting a little oil on the pan and put the eggplants on the pan and spread the squash all around. Drizzle olive oil on top of the vegetables and salt. These will roast with the rest of the layers. One of the layers of the lasagna is roasted basil garlic tomatoes. These are great, and these are really good as a side dish just by themselves, but I'm using it as a layer in the lasagna. To do this, you just cut each cherry tomato in half. Next, we're going to put a few cloves of garlic on top of the tomatoes. Take some basil leaves and put them on top of the tomatoes. And then salt and drizzle with a little oil. Bake the tomatoes in a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes. Bake the squash and eggplant in a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes. To make the nut topping, roast raw cashews in a pie plate, just spread them out, and bake the raw cashews in a 350-degree oven for 8 minutes. I just took these cashews out of the oven, and to make the topping, the first thing to do is to drizzle these with umeboshi plum vinegar. Stir it and let the vinegar evaporate. To make the cashew topping, I'm taking these cooled umeboshi plum vinegar seasoned toasted cashews, and I'm going to grind them up in the food processor. You can do this with almonds or with cashews, and it's really a nice way to salt nuts. Perfect. We'll set these aside for future use. This recipe calls for dried shiitake mushrooms. We want to reconstitute the mushrooms. I'm going to put them in a bowl and then pour boiling water over them. And put a little apple cider vinegar. If you don't have apple cider vinegar, you can really use any kind of vinegar. Put some vinegar in the water and let these soak for about 20 or so minutes until they're soft. To prepare the shiitake mushrooms, I want to take them out of the soaking water and I want to cut the stems out. The stems on the shiitake mushrooms are not edible. To make the shiitake layer, we put the mushrooms in the food processor. These really add a nice dimension. They've got a nice intense taste that's going to be enhanced with the dried tomatoes. I'm adding the dried tomatoes to the food processor. And then I'm going to blend this until it's blended coarsely. That's perfect. Look at that. Doesn't that look nice? It's a beautiful color. It's going to make a nice layer. This is tinkyado lasagna. It's made of rice, and it's really good, and it holds up really well. I need 9 pieces of lasagna for this recipe, so I'm going to cook 9 noodles. To make the tofu cheese, I'm going to start by mincing the garlic in the food processor. I'm going to peel the garlic first. I'm using 2 big cloves. That is such a cool way to mince garlic. Break up the tofu and place it in the food processor. Add nutritional yeast, umeboshi plum vinegar, which gives it a tangy taste. The yeast gives it a cheesy taste. And between the two, you get a nice simulation. And then we're adding the olive oil. Add a little salt to start. I'm not going to add all of this because I want to taste it. The umeboshi plum vinegar is very salty. Process. That looks nice. Now I want to add the basil, but first I want to chop the basil before I add it, because otherwise it'll turn this green and that just doesn't look very good in the dish. Add the basil. And pulse. Taste. This is good. It definitely has enough salt. It's tangy and cheese-like. It's going to make a nice layer. To assemble the lasagna, I have all my layers ready. And the first thing I'm going to do is put some of the shiitake, mushroom, dried tomato layer on the bottom, just a little bit, so that it doesn't stick. This is one of those old tricks. Sometimes you can put sauce on the bottom instead of oil. Then I put my first layers of the noodles. You want to try to dry them off so you don't get a lot of water in the lasagna. That's the reason we roasted the vegetables. I wanted to get a lot of the moisture out of the vegetables before I put them into the lasagna. Okay, then the next layer is the tofu cheese, and I just really want to put a little bit on top of the noodles. That's just perfect. The next layer is a layer of the tomatoes. Aren't these pretty? Look at those tomatoes. As I mentioned before, this is a great side dish. And I want to try to spoon them out and not get a lot of the moisture in here. The next layer are the vegetables. I'm just going to alternate squash and eggplant. The next layer is the shiitake mushrooms and the dried tomatoes. So we just want to sprinkle that on. Isn't this colorful? Then we put another layer of the noodles on. Add the tofu. Just spread thinly on the noodles. And just keep repeating this process until you run out of layers. I'm finished layering the lasagna. Isn't this pretty? Now I want to top it off with the umeboshi plum salted cashews. Bake at 350 degrees for about an hour. This is baked for an hour, and I let it sit for about 15 minutes, or even a little longer if you want, so that it sets up and theoretically should cut really cleanly. So I'm going to cut it. This is a splendid alternative to traditional lasagna. you've enjoyed our program today. I am devoted to showing people how to cook without gluten or dairy and with low or no cholesterol. I believe it is possible to cook without products that cause problems and to create dishes with alternative ingredients that rival those with traditional ingredients. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to write to me at info@alternativecook.com. For a listing of ingredients used in the DVDs or to order more DVDs, please visit our website at www.alternativecook.com. I look forward to seeing you in another program.
Bye.
No gluten, no dairy, low cholesterol. No gluten, no dairy, low cholesterol. The gluten-free, dairy-free breadsticks are packed with flavor.